Subtraction of vectors. In this lecture, we are going to discuss how do we subtract two vectors. Let us say there are two vectors, A vector and B vector. So these are the two vectors, A vector and B vector, and we want to find A vector minus B vector. I can write down A vector minus B vector to be equal to A vector plus minus B vector, where minus b is a vector anti-parallel to b vector. We have discussed this in the concept of negative vector, that negative vector is nothing but a vector which is opposite to that vector in direction and equal in magnitude. So we draw this minus b vector which is opposite to b vector. Let us call this minus b vector a new vector equal to c vector. The c vector is anti-parallel to b vector. Thus, A minus b vector is equal to A plus minus b vector, which can be said to be equal to A vector plus c vector. And therefore, finding A vector minus b vector is same as finding A vector plus c vector. And we know how to add two vectors A and c. We will place the tail of c over the head of A. The third side of the triangle will be equal to A vector plus c vector. And A vector plus c vector is same as A vector plus minus b vector. Thus, if we want to find subtraction of two vectors, A vector and B vector, these are the two vectors, we reverse the direction of B vector, the vector which is to be subtracted, and then we add the minus b vector to the A vector. By placing the tail of minus b vector over the head of A vector, as we do in vector addition, the third side of the triangle will therefore be equal to A vector plus minus b vector, which is nothing but A vector minus b vector. And therefore, A vector minus b vector is nothing but the sum of two vectors, A vector and minus b vector. The subtraction of two vectors is nothing but an alternative form of addition of two vectors. If we want to find A vector minus B vector, we reverse the direction of B and add it to the A vector. The sum of these two vectors will be equal to A vector minus B vector. Subtracting two vectors is therefore equivalent to adding two vectors. There's one more way to subtract two vectors which is more convenient and more handy. Let us say these are the two vectors, A vector and B vector we want to subtract. We place the tail of B over the tail of A. The third side of the triangle from the head of B to the tail of A will be A vector minus B vector. And thus this side of the triangle from head of B to the tail of A will be A vector minus B vector. So what do? Whenever we want to subtract two vectors, we place the tail of one vector over the tail of another vector. The third side of the triangle from the head of one to the tail of another will be equal to the difference of two vectors. The proof of this is very simple. Let us say the third side of the triangle after joining the tail of two vectors is x vector. In this triangle, from the triangle law of vector addition, B vector plus x vector will be equal to A vector. Thus, B vector plus x vector will be equal to A vector, and therefore x vector will be equal to A vector minus B vector. This is the method which we are going to use to subtract two vectors. We put the tail of two vectors we want to subtract over each other. The third side of the triangle will represent the difference of these two vectors.